To the Western world, this seemed to be extraordinary. In any case, there was also a kind of, a newspaper has described it very well. The Express in Pakistan calls it anticipated injustice. It's almost as though whenever a woman is oppressed in Pakistan or in many other cultures, and particularly in Muslim cultures, it's anticipated that she won't get justice, that everybody is against her. She's the only voice that's speaking the truth. No men, particularly men, will ever support her. So in any case, the Pakistan government was pressed by the Western world, particularly the United States, and Parvez Musharraf, who was then the president, he invited Mai to Islamabad, and he gave her a compensatory amount of 9,000 US dollars, which is a huge amount of money in Pakistan. Receiving this, Mai then made a declaration that she was going to start a school in her village. Rather than take that money and become rich and sort of live off that, she decided that she wanted to educate girls, and this was an amazing cause. This was taken up by the press. In 2004, a New York Times writer called Nicholas Kristof, he visited her, and he made her story really public. He started writing about it in the New York Times. I'm sure many of you have read about it then. The Canadian ambassador to Islamabad, his wife got very involved and got a lot of money sent to her, and eventually they started collecting funds to support the school, and $160,000 was raised. Now, while all this is happening, Mai is made out to be this exceptional and extraordinary woman, and I agree with that totally. I think that it is not that Mai is not a hero and that we have to see her in a particular light. I feel that what happens is that the media stepped in and began to embed certain perspectives of this case so deeply into the story that we completely obliterate and we don't hear Mai's voice anymore. The voice that comes out, or the voices that come out, are the voices of the media, are the voices of the interested groups. For example, there are reports uniformly in the New York Times, in many newspapers, that uniformly state that the rapists included a holy man, a cleric. They, of course, don't use the word imam because many of them, including people here in my own university, can't pronounce it. They keep saying imam, like Iraq. So, they don't know these words. So they keep saying cleric. He's not a cleric, really. An imam is not a cleric by any stretch of imagination. But still, we have to find equivalents in English. So what happens is that there's this embedded story that the holy man or the cleric actually was involved in her rape. One report in the New York Times, even not Nicholas Kristof, but reviewing other works on her, said that her father abetted in her rape and gave her up to the council for that reason. Nobody mentions, for example, that although what is glossed over is that Mai received an outpouring of domestic support, financial compensation as well, but also that she is breaking the mold of an unlettered woman, but she's got support from other unlettered women. For example, her own mother, her own family members. A lot of these reports also gloss over the fact that Mai, in fact, is a divorced woman. She's 28 years old, Punjabi, illiterate woman, living in a village with her parents, teaching the Quran. But she was married and she didn't get on with her husband. So her her husband was a failure, basically. I'm sort of being polite over here. But he was just completely, he sucked at everything he did. So she decided to get, that she couldn't live with him, and her father stood by her. He stood by her, he organized the divorce, and she is here living with him. They take away all that agency that woman's personality has, and that must be a part of what is happening, and they make her into this victim. At the same time, so I'm going to look at two very quickly before I run out of time. I'm going to look at just two memoirs, two books that are written about her, and I'll just mention them very quickly, just to give you a sense of how the views are depicted. There is a memoir written by a woman called Marie-Therese Cuny in 2006. It's called In the Name of Honor, by Mukhtar Mai, as told to Marie-Therese Cuny. Marie-Therese Cuny is French. Mukhtar Mai only speaks Saraiki. So Mukhtar Mai's version is translated from Saraiki into English to a woman called Linda Convoy. Linda translates it into French into Maurice Cuny. Maurice Cuny writes the book in French, and then it's translated back into English. That's the book we have, In the Name of Honor. So you can imagine what is happening here, how much this interest is being, appropriated at various levels. In this, what I found very striking, and I'll just mention two things, is the role of men keeps coming out in Mai's account. It's like the men are bursting out of there. Abdul Razak, for instance, is the man who, according to Mai, tries desperately to save her. He's the imam. He not only opposes the rape, but he's the one who condemns it in the Friday sermon. It was his face that Mai describes as trustworthy, and when she's taken into the police station, she's in a separate room. The imam and her father and her brother are in a separate room. When she comes out, it's the imam who shouts at her, "Don't put your thumbprint on a piece of paper." It's he who sings it out to her across the corridor and alerts her to the fact that if she just puts that, she's signing things which she has no knowledge of. She's, by the way, put her thumbprint on many papers by now. The other thing that is important, so Marie-Therese Cuny just glosses over it as an aside, doesn't ask Mai more about it, doesn't bring it out. The other factor that I find very interesting is that the first FIR that is lodged by her is because there is a judge. And she says, Cuny calls this chapter a most remarkable judge. And there's a whole chapter in the book devoted to it. But you know something? She doesn't mention the name of the judge. He's nameless. I think that's almost deliberate, to keep the man anonymous so that we don't know the agents who are helping her. According to the testimony that she has reproduced here, I will quote very quickly what Mai says. She says, "I stand before the judge. He is a distinguished man, very polite, and the first official to call for an extra chair so that I may sit down. Instead of lording over me from his judge's seat, he sits opposite me on the other side of the table. He asks for a pitcher of water and some glasses. We both refresh ourselves, and I'm grateful to him because it's been a rough day. Remember, Mukhtar and Bibi, you are before a judge. Tell me the precise truth, everything that happened. Don't be afraid. I must know what was done to you. You are alone here with me and my assistant, who will write down what you tell me. This is a court of law, and I am here to learn what happened. You may speak freely." So, these powerful words that come from a local judge in a very small Punjabi district office are just totally glossed over, never represented in the Western media. It seems to be that, everybody, as I said, every man in the whole of Pakistan is a sexual predator. And were it not for the Western agents of protection, there would be 1,000 more Mukhtar and Mais. And then again, we can go on to that. This book becomes very problematic because soon after Mukhtar and Mais, towards the end of the book, her testimony is interspersed with just completely sort of related, but the sources of these other passages are not clear. It's very difficult, it's very confusing, because Cuny pulls out passages about rapes of other women, violence against women in Pakistan, many different episodes, and so they all seem to run into one another and become a composite picture. Also not recorded, and this is an interesting fact, and this is part of my research that I'm doing in Bangladesh, and I hope to do in Pakistan, is that the way in which the domestic argument over how Mukhtar and Mai's case is being treated is not only about domestic violence and sexual violence and the rights of women, but it is also about Western ambitions and particularly American interference in Pakistani life. So a lot of the accusations are, these NGOs are coming in and telling women, and they're changing our women, and it becomes a nationalistic agenda. I don't know if any of you remember, but soon after this case happened, Pervez Musharraf went to New York, and he was at a press conference in a room like this, and women at the back, including some very well-known Pakistani activists, started heckling him and saying, why are you not helping Mukhtar and Mai? Why aren't you doing this? Why are you doing that? And you know what Pervez Musharraf said, if anyone recalls? He said, oh, well, women in Pakistan just get raped to get visas to the United States. Right? Now, he expressed something, obviously, people went crazy about this, and I feel that, his remarks are completely offensive. But if we deconstruct it, they speak of a debate that has nothing to do really with what the West is interested in. This is to do with nationalism. This is to do with, Pakistan's own future as a country, the communities that are in our part of the world, and how Western involvement in it and interference in it often solidifies opinion. Now, there's another account by an Australian woman called, I can't see how many minutes, 10 seconds, 2 minutes? Okay. I'll just mention another account, and I'll answer questions later if you like, by an Australian woman called I don't know how you pronounce it, Bronwyn Curran. She claims that although a rape happened, it was very different. There was no gang rape, that Mukhtaran was not paraded naked through the streets. She says there's a custom called Vari, in which one clan or one family, if it's held responsible for something that it did to another, will offer up a woman in marriage to a member of that family as part of an appeasement. And this is how this happened. Mukhtar was actually married to a guy on the Mastoi side, and he had a immediate Sharia marriage and then threw her out. And the story evolved because the Imam got very upset and made it out to be a gang rape. And then Mukhtaran just went along. She had already put her thumbprint down. She didn't want to take it back. The kind of implication is that Mukhtaran is a victim of rape, but not of gang rape. And it's a fact that, the parading through the village, naked, all that, there's no evidence for it. And if there were, the courts would have upheld it. It's been through 3 different layers of judicial inquiry. The prosecution has one of the most eminent lawyers in Pakistan, Ehtijaz Ahsan, who is very well known for Mai, but it didn't pass the rules of evidence required for capital offenses, right, or for life imprisonment. So that's another chapter altogether. I'll just close by saying that my interest in this case is that although it's difficult to be sure of the details, we can be sure of a few things. First, that my struggle is an example of how women are fighting against oppression, not just inside Pakistan, but elsewhere, and that we ought to be attentive to the many different interests that women have to negotiate and that converge on these incidents, and that create issues that are not necessarily obvious when we see flat media representations and we hear the simplistic stories of how, as Spivak said, the white man's claim that, or interest rather, to save the brown woman from the brown man. So, thank you very much.
साहिबान, आज बैसाखी का दिन है। Position, load.